Hi YouTube. Today the MX-5 gets some love. I'm installing a Mishimoto oil cooler, changing all the fluids, and I'm upgrading the brake pads thanks to Hawk. The Hawk pads are part of a larger series which I've been working on for a while now, where I've been testing different brake pads on different cars, and I'm getting close to being able to show you the results. So if you want to see that, subscribe and you'll see it in the future. Let's get to it. Before I get started, I'd like to talk about the fluids that I've got here and how I chose them. This is water because it's 35 degrees out and I'm thirsty. As for the rest of it, I read the manual.
Just read the manuals, read the books.
Manuals?
Read the
What
books.
manual?
Read the books. What books?
I had a look online and everyone was arguing about what fluids to use, so I just pulled out the manual and there it was. And a lot of things are wrong. One of the things that I hear a lot about the NBs is that you can only use a GL4 fluid. Right there in the manual it says you can use a GL5. And another thing is a lot of people keep telling you to use diff fluid that has a winter rating. Now, generally speaking, if a manufacturer recommends a single SAE rating for your diff like this one does, the reason they're doing that is because single rated oils are more stable. Once you start adding friction modifiers and viscosity modifiers to your oil, those modifiers will break down and accelerate the breakdown of the fluid. So on a regular car, how often do you change the fluid in your transmission and your diff? So if you are putting in something that is not recommended by the manufacturer, such as a diff fluid with a winter rating, keep in mind that it's not going to last as long as the manufacturer intended it for service intervals. So with that out of the way, time to start working on the car. So I've unpacked the oil cooler, so I just thought I'd take you through the parts. This is the sandwich plate to feed to the cooler itself. It's got a couple of fittings in it, so I can put in a temperature and pressure sensor, which I will be doing at a later date. It has a mounting bracket and air feed for under the splash guard for the engine. This is actually half the reason that I bought it. They have a blog on how they put this kit together, and I really liked that they showed the before and after temperatures as well as how they fitted it. So I think this is a pretty good kit for being accessible to install easily. If you're doing a full race car, obviously you'd want it to be on a front mount setup, but for me, I saw this as a really good low effort way of getting an oil cooler fitted on a car that's got a factory turbo anyway. So that will make things a lot easier for me to fit, and I can get that little bit of extra cooling. Being in Australia, it definitely won't go astray, considering I do the occasional track day. These are the coolant hoses. So this is the first time opening it, as you can see, so we're going through the excitement together. Don't we feel like we're building a bond internet? All of my audience of 10 people, I appreciate your support and I hope you enjoy it. So that's quite a nice little setup. It's all well protected, so your AN fittings are nice and shiny. One of these hoses is a bit longer than the other, so that it can reach to the other side of the cooler and the engine bay, and I'll show you how that all mounts up in a second. Hose, and that's the actual cooler there, so I might as well open that now and I'll show you where it sits in the engine bay. So I'll have a link in the description to their blog on how they put this together. There's no instructions with the kit, so knowing that blog is actually pretty good if you want to install it. This isn't obviously a very large oil cooler, but considering this is such a hot place, the car's a turbo, and it does skid pans and small track days, this should be sufficient to just help keep that oil within the correct temperature range. And I will know for sure once I get the temperature sensor in there, which will also in the future help me better select the viscosity of oil. So I'll show you where this fits up under the car. So the kit sits just up here on the steering rack. Some people kind of get a bit worried about the way that it could connect with the ground, but if you hit this hard enough to damage it, you've got other things to worry about with your chassis and your power steering. So this is a low point, sure, but it's suitable. It will get enough airflow to make a little bit of a difference, as their testing on their blog showed, and I think that will help quite a bit. So to get started, I'm going to remove these 17mm bolts holding in the steering rack, because that's going to be our mounting point. Needed to get a slightly longer spanner to get the leverage I needed on that. With that out of the way, these two brackets are used for mounting the oil cooler. So the bent one goes up there, the straight one goes there, and they end up at the same level. So the L-shaped mounting bracket was actually interfering a little bit with this hard line for the power steering, I think it is. Yep. And just had a bit of chat with the one guy, so we actually just put a little bit of weight on it to just bend the hard line out of the way so we get nice clearance. So time to reassemble that. There is a slight bit of asymmetry to this, so the asymmetric sides match up, so that becomes symmetric on the other mounting side, so just make sure you put that in the correct way. There's a bit of interference with the rounded edge on this, so I'm going to go grind that flat. So that's being ground flat. See if that comes into focus. There you go. So I've ground that edge flat so that it won't interfere. It only needed a little bit off, but I just made sure it was completely clear. So I will just be loosely fastening this in place to hold everything square when I tighten up the main bolts. This is the shroud that channels the air up into the cooler, so we'll just assemble that. So the shroud's got these little rubber mats to protect the cooler from chafing. You just mount over the top like so. Due to accessibility, I'm going to assemble the oil hoses and the AN fittings on the block before I actually route it, because it's a little bit tight up inside there. Because of the way this faces in the engine bay, this will be sitting up against the engine like that. This one will run to the far point, like that, and this one will run to the near point. So time to install a sandwich plate. Unfortunately, there's no real good way for me to film it because of where the filter is. It's behind this member here, and you can't see from that way because that's where I put my head, but basically I have to get the sandwich plate over the filter, and then I hold the sandwich plate in with this fitting, do that up nice and tight, and then the filter will go onto that in the future. But while I'm doing that, I have to also feed the AN lines through so that I can get everything located correctly so that it all bolts together. So I've immediately changed my mind now. I've had a look at it. I'm taking the oil lines off, putting the sandwich plate in, and I will feed the lines in through the back and hope for the best. It's a bit difficult to see but that's as far around as it can rotate without contacting parts of the chassis. So you don't want it doing that, otherwise it's just going to vibrate and make a horrible noise. So I'm going to tighten that in place and then try and get the oil lines through the gap and put that all together.